Welcome to the Cauldron. This is a community, a space to share, inspire and support. I'm your host, Annette, and each episode I welcome real, raw and powerful conversations from everyday individuals with extraordinary experiences to the organisations lifting others up. This is a place where truth is spoken, healing is honoured and resilience is celebrated. This is the Cauldron, where we sit with people who have walked through fire, found their strength, rebuilt, or simply kept going when life asked more of them. Here we acknowledge the organisations, leaders, and volunteers who are instrumental in their journey. Welcome to the Cauldron. I am speaking with Kathleen Hope, Chief Executive Officer of SunnyKids today, an organisation here on the Sunshine Coast supporting vulnerable children and families through some of the most difficult moments in their lives. Today we'll talk about the work SunnyKids does and the pressures facing families in our community. Before we begin, I do want listeners to know that today's conversation includes a discussion on domestic and family violence, trauma, family stress, and the impact these experiences can have on children. Some parts of this conversation may be difficult or upsetting to hear. Please take care while listening, and if this brings anything up for you, consider stepping away, speaking with someone you trust, or reaching out to a support service. If you or someone else is in immediate danger, call emergency services on 000. Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us today. It's wonderful to have you here. Before we get into the work of SunnyKids, I'd love to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your pathway into community services and what first drew you to this kind of work?
Thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate your time. Look, it's been pretty much a lifelong journey, if I'm honest. I was born with a very, very strong passion for social justice. For as far back as I can remember, I was always the person who was on my soapbox about something that was happening in the community or something that I saw on the news. And I always had this very strong passion and a lack of understanding on why humans chose to behave in certain ways and why our system wasn't designed to address those behaviours in a meaningful way. So from right back to the 80s, I can recall seeing things on the news that would bother me, and I would have a bit of a rant about it with my family, and I kind of became known as the person to not start a conversation with because it would end up being political or upsetting for someone. So it's always been there. But my life took a slightly different turn when I began my career, and I was heading much down the path for more of a corporate career, and it really did not align with me. And I can remember the day, but I can't remember when it was, when I gave my notice to my boss at the time and just said, no, I'm going to go back to study and I'm going to focus on what I want to do. And I don't know where the last 16 odd years have gone since then. So it's taken over my whole world.
We're so glad that you did go down that path because you have done some incredible things in your career. I want to ask about those early experiences helping families on the coast.
Yeah, so when I first started on the Sunshine Coast in the world of domestic and family violence, and it wasn't something that I had pursued actively. I was very interested in child protection, and I didn't know what form that would take, but I actually did a student placement at Najida, which is the SunnyKids high security refuge, all those years ago. And the moment I started, I just fell in love with the passion and fire that I saw in the clients. And I think I had a very preconceived idea of how a victim survivor would behave. And I was completely wrong. And it was such an amazing and fulfilling experience to just see how much power these women in particular refused to give up and how much resilience it took for them to start again. So I recall walking through the gates the very first time and feeling incredibly intimidated. And I know that everybody that was there at the time would have seen it and felt it and heard it in my voice, but all I felt was admiration by the end of my first day, and there was just no turning back from that moment. It was a very different world, though, and not all that long ago, in fact. Back in 2011 was when I started in the refuge, and it was a different framework. It was a different model of working, and it still had a very, what I call an old school welfare mentality, and there were really beautiful parts to that, but there were also some harmful parts in working in that way.
And time goes by so fast, doesn't it? Some of those things that you saw that day have improved, and there's some things now that aren't so great. I read somewhere you said it was a privilege to be involved in someone's world when they are at their most vulnerable. How does that mindset shape the way you lead and interact with the families that come to you for help?
It is, I have said that, and I've said that a number of times throughout my career. And to explain that a little, I consider myself quite a private person. And I know it probably doesn't look like that with the TV interviews and all the rest of it for SunnyKids. But when it comes to my family and my personal life, I've always kept things very close to my chest. So there are people in my family who don't know things about me. So when I am sitting with someone who has gone through horrendous abuse and they've experienced this journey that is unimaginable for many, the fact that they trust me enough to share the most vulnerable and intimate experiences that they've had is such a privilege. Privilege doesn't even encompass the feeling that comes with that. It's an honor. And it's an honor that I think we should always remember. So, there are moments in this career when you become fatigued and it can feel like a little bit too much. And then somebody shares with you what's happening for them. And just that extension of trust, just that olive branch that they're providing, it brings you back immediately and it stokes the fire of advocacy, and you just want to do everything you can to support them. And that rescuing mentality is actually the thing that draws us to this kind of work, but it's also the thing that we have to manage the most when it comes to boundaries.
One thing that's come through is you still have that passion. What keeps you here? Because there must be days that are really hard and really challenging.
There are, most definitely. And it's interesting because I had experienced this not that long ago. I had a moment where, well, it was a day actually. It was one of those days that we all experience where we feel incredibly irritable and it feels like everybody needs a piece of you, whether it's at work or as a mum, and there's not enough of you to go around. And you become almost resentful on those days and you try to regulate really hard. And the more you regulate, the more energy you're putting into that and the less you're being present. And I had one of these days not so long ago, and I was in back-to-back meetings and I had photo shoots and everything was going on and it was all important. And at the end of the day, we had a couple of students in a school that we're working in that we needed to go and meet with for a photo shoot of all things, and it doesn't seem important in the grand scheme of what we do, but it's a part of what we do. And it was at the end of the day. So I got in the car and I'm on phone calls all the way, and we get there and I had prepared myself to be as present as I could. But I knew even in that moment that I was still just playing a role. And I walked into the principal's office and the two kids were there and they started sharing with me immediately what was going on for them and the things that they were proud of and what they were working towards. This was for our scholarships program. And I just immediately fell into their world. And it felt like nothing else that had happened that day actually mattered. And I was on a high on the drive home. And it was just a constant reminder that what we do matters and the impact matters. And if we get caught up in the day to day and we forget about the longer term benefits, we'll burn out. So having those moments is so essential, even though they're few and far between. And that's what keeps us going. And also getting frustrated can burn the fires too. So we can sometimes use our frustration to drive our advocacy.
And for you, it was a bit of a reminder of why you do what you do, even on the hard days.
Absolutely. It was the perfect end to a very tough day.
It's always lovely getting to know the person behind the title, so thank you. I want to move now into exploring the organisation that has become such an important part of your life. Tell us about SunnyKids and the work you do there.
We work across the entire spectrum. So a lot of the work that we have done for the last 26 years has centred around crisis intervention, and it's usually very high risk. So risk management, safety plans, relocating families, starting from scratch. And a lot of that work has been probably the core that has driven our practice development. But for 26 years, we have tried very, very hard to develop prevention and early intervention models that help address the core issues of domestic and family violence in our community. That was incredibly difficult to do for the first 15 years of this organisation because domestic violence was not something that was discussed publicly. You know, the horrendous experience of Rosie Batty became a shining light on a topic that wasn't considered palatable to discuss publicly. And her determination and her resilience in making sure that the loss of her son didn't get forgotten actually opened the door for a lot of DFV services to start talking more honestly about what it really looks like. And for the last decade in particular, there's been a lot of work in that with government and with the media and advocacy groups. But we are still very, very far from where we need to be when it comes to community education and understanding. Our work centres mostly around how do we stop future generations from repeating the cycle. All of the research is there. We all know that children who experience early life adversity are much more likely to experience substance abuse issues, mental health issues, and the cycle of domestic and family violence into adulthood. And we are seeing, with a huge focus on youth behaviour and youth crime, that that is playing out right before our eyes. So we're kind of sitting on this precipice, if you will, where we have the potential to see an overcorrection and a whole lot of conformity that's required in order to bring community standards back to where people expect, or a lot of reparation to do. And I know where I sit on that, but it can be very, very hard for the general public to be accepting of that. For that reason, we implement a lot of prevention programs as well, whether it's be education, books, engagement with schools, mentoring through sports programs, school holiday clinics, Tiny Tots and Kids Club in the refuge. All of those things are designed to intersect with every other program that we have so that we are looking for and creating opportunities to engage with children to understand healthy behaviours and redirect toxic ones. That is really at the core of what we do.
My big concern is this added pressure on families with the housing crisis and the increase in cost of living. From your perspective, what are some of the biggest challenges families are facing on the Sunshine Coast?
Absolutely. Economic instability is one of the biggest factors. Now, it's really important to stress that economic instability is not a precursor for DV. However, all domestic violence behaviours, including coercive control, can be considered normal human behaviours, but to the extreme. We all seek control over our surroundings when we're feeling unstable. When we apply those strategies that we use ourselves onto other people, and we do so intentionally, the harm that it causes is what we're responsible for. So when we are seeing housing affordability and availability issues, we're seeing families struggle to put food on the table, families who are not sending kids to school because they don't have school lunches to pack for them and they're concerned about the embarrassment of that. Those kind of pressures inside a family dynamic become extreme. And when there are already unhealthy behaviours in that relationship, it is a very, very slippery slope into toxic and abusive behaviours. Now, that's generalising. There are obviously many cases, unfortunately, of people who are choosing violence for their own benefit that gives them. But in general, that's why we see numbers go up when we see economic pressures in the general community.
I look at it like a bit of a pressure cooker. I read somewhere that stress alone doesn't cause domestic violence, but it can very well coexist beside it. I just want to give some perspective to the scale of the work you do because you're very humble. SunnyKids reported that the 2024-25 period, you provided 7,300 bed nights, supported 850 adults and 1,700 children, sponsored 100 children, and supplied 3,000 Christmas gifts to children and families. When you hear those numbers, what do they tell you about the level of need? And has the demand gone up in recent years?
It has actually, and this is quite timely because I literally have just completed our collation of statistics for the last financial year today. And I am impressed with the scale at which we've been able to deliver services, but I'm saddened by how indicative it is of the need in our community. In the last financial year, we have seen an increase of 68% of families needing support from us. That's just our service. That is not sector-wide. That is not taking into account anything else that's going on in our community. That is just for SunnyKids. You know, we supported over 2,390 odd children in the previous financial year, and this financial year it has been over 4,000 children. They are staggering numbers, and although we are very pleased that we've been able to reach that number of people, it terrifies me and the rest of the team when we can't help everybody, and we just can't. We have wait lists for every program, and it's really scary to see just how saturated the Sunshine Coast is with this issue. And it can be perceived as a very affluent and comfortable place to live. And often it can be hard for people to accept this is a real issue here. And it is a real, very real issue.
Those numbers haven't gone up a little bit. Those numbers have nearly doubled for those kids. That's absolutely staggering. You do such an amazing amount of work, which is why people come to you for help. What can the public do to support you?
Well, in general, what I would like to say here is, and we touched on it before, because there has been so much talk around domestic and family violence, and there's been obviously recent news in the media because of the reduction in DFE funding from state government, all of those things can actually lead to people becoming fatigued with the topic. They can be annoyed. They don't want to hear about it anymore, especially if it doesn't touch them personally. What I would like people to realise is that every one of us is touched by this, whether you realise it or not. These kids are catching the same bus your kids are. They are sitting in the same classroom. Your sister, mum, friends, work partners are experiencing this, and they are quiet about it. This is a very, very secret and insidious disease in our community. And if people want to support, stay present, be an active bystander. If you see something, say something. If you hear something, do something. Obviously keeping your own safety in mind. But let's not be bystanders. Let's address the cause of this horrible experience for so many families. And like I said, say something and do something, being really present about it.
When those families first connect with SunnyKids, what might the support look like for them? Like what happens in the early stages?
Well, it does depend on the program, but in general, the first thing that we're doing is checking on safety. Okay, so if somebody's calling us or walking through the front door or being referred by another agency, the first thing we want to know is, are you safe and why have you called us? The next thing that we're doing is we're triaging where you need to sit within our programs, how quickly do we need to move, and do we need the service system to respond more immediately? While we're assessing that with you, we're also assessing capacity. So we're looking at how long has this been going on for? Who is in your support network? Who have you spoken to about this before? And what is your accessibility concerns, if any? And I don't mean necessarily around physical disabilities. I mean about access to services, access to phones. Are there digital accounts that you have that are private? Do you have your own bank account? Do we need to prepare a go bag? Do we need a safe room within your property? Are you ready to leave now? Or do we need to think about safety in place, which is a very, very common thing for us? So all of those questions are happening within the first 5 to 10 minutes of a conversation with someone.
One phrase that keeps coming up when I was researching SunnyKids was this idea of building a village around children and family communities. I guess the idea of supporting people within arm's reach, to bring them in close as a community and a village. Can you tell me some of the things that you've put in place to make that happen, for that to work?
Absolutely. Well, I guess it's born from the premise that because we don't have the village that we used to have, a virtual village of community connections is essential to recovery, no matter where you are in your journey. So, whether you're in crisis and in emergency accommodation, or whether you're in DFE counselling and you're working through all of the trauma you've experienced, it's a strategic case coordination model. And what we're doing is looking at lifelong connections, whether it be with other services or other groups of individuals that you can connect with for each of the concerns or issues that we might have. As a result of domestic and family violence and trauma, as you know, Annette, it can really oppress your ability to think outside of your circumstances and be strategic, because there is so much fear and so much control. So we create an artificial village with services to start with. So it'll be your local GP, it might be a support group, it might be a support teacher at the school for your kids, and they become a part of your circle, and then they're involved in that case plan, even if they're not aware of the fact that they're involved in that case plan. They become somebody that person knows, you know what, if this is what's happening for me, I can reach out to them. So that's the beginning of it. But the end goal is to have a big enough virtual village in their world that when they don't need us anymore, they are equipped with all of the services and support that they need if the wheels start to fall off again, because this is cyclical. Trauma is not just a set and forget fix, and life happens. So we want to know that when somebody's leaving our service, it's not just everything now is fixed. They're equipped for what hits them in the future. And it's a great model. It absolutely is effective. And also a lot of the people that we work with don't want to end their support with us. So it gives them a bit of a safety net, or a, comfortable blanket, if you will, that they are not on their own, and we believe in them, and they have demonstrated capacity to do this without us.
We'll catch you if you fall.
Exactly.
We've talked about the pressures on families and what they're carrying at the moment, cost of living, housing stress, and the general weight of just trying to keep everything together. And we have talked a little bit about domestic violence in amongst the other topics that we've brought up. And it's a difficult conversation, but I think it is a necessary one. And you mentioned before that over the last decade, education and awareness has not only brought it out of the shadows, but it's enlightened us, because, generations before, we all grew up thinking domestic violence was represented by bruises, but we now know that there's lots of different kinds of abuse. So I wanted to just talk about some of the different types and some of the early warning signs that might be missed.
Yes, there's much more recognition and awareness of the different forms that abuse can take. And it's not just about adding extra categories to a piece of legislation. It's about recognition over a significant period of time that all of these behaviours that are abusive, oppressive, suppressive, and cause trauma are equal in their harm. And that has taken a long time to have recognised in legislation, and we still have a fair way to go. As you know, May last year, the coercive control legislation was passed. And the fact that we're in the year 2020s and this has only just become legislation is astounding. Coercive control has been around as a recognised term since the early 70s. So it just goes to show how long it's taken for this to be a recognised issue. But as you said, it has always been behind closed doors, and it has always been represented by usually an image of a woman cowering in the corner with a man standing over her with his fist with what looks like the intention to punch her. I have worked with many thousands of women in particular over the years. I've worked with men as well, but many thousands of women. And I can tell you that by and large, majority of those women will verbalise that they would have preferred something tangible, like a physical assault, to what they experienced, because it's evidence. They're not gaslit. People will believe them. It's easier for people to understand. And that is quite a shocking reality when you think about the fact that a woman is saying, I need a physical example of what has been done to me in order to be believed. There are also some newer, if you will, recognised forms of abuse, which includes digital imagery and reproductive abuse. Now, they've not been around for a long time, and it is still taking some time for people to understand what those things mean. However, it is about time that it was recognised, because it is a significantly effective way to control somebody, to use. To give you an example, we have had clients with bank accounts where somebody who's using violence will transfer $1 to them and in the comments abuse them, and use that mechanism of transferring money through a bank account to continue the abuse when someone has fled. There are incredibly creative ways that people are choosing to use intentional violence against people and to control them. And if the general public knew all of that, they would be shocked. But it's also walking a line. We don't want to educate people on how to do it either, because that is a problem too. So it's about time we talked about it more openly and honestly, and opportunities like this allow us to do that.
I really do believe education and awareness is the key to this, to bring it out into the spotlight. And I was only thinking the other day about social media and what impact technology has had on domestic violence, because I see it on social media every day, the comments, and I just think, gosh, is that really where we got to? Because it's behind a screen. And I was wondering what impact that was having on domestic violence. Yeah.
Unfortunately, the term keyboard warriors comes to mind, and not just in relation to domestic and family violence, but you see how it plays out in attitudes, and particularly on community boards where there'll be an issue or a behaviour or something that someone has experienced, and you read the comments and you see some of those very old school remarks about, I'd take care of them or take it back to them and things like this. And just the normalisation of violence as acceptable in our community is one of the major driving forces of intimate partner violence. So why are we still tolerating this? Why are we still making it acceptable and even laughing or agreeing with people who consider violence to be an acceptable form of addressing a frustration?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I want to talk about the kids because I know how important they are to you. They are innocent in an abusive environment and they are our next generation, but the trauma for them can be unmeasurable. Can you walk me through the different programs that you run for the kids through SunnyKids?
Absolutely. Well, look, the first thing I'd probably say is that children experience emotions through behaviour. So whether that's happy or sad or angry or frustrated or excited, the behaviour is the first indicator. So as I said before, all of our programs are designed to intersect, but I'll give you an example. Our ADAPT NRL clinics, which are school holiday clinics, and they are not targeting vulnerable individuals. These are actually targeting just generally kids in our community. And they go to these clinics during the school holidays and they get to learn some NRL skills with Moses and Bai, and they have fun. We provide healthy lunch. I think the last one was sponsored by Subway. It was great. And throughout the day when they're having rests and breaks, they're doing workshops around communication and not being a bystander. And it's very, very age appropriate, and it's certainly not extreme or intensive. But what we want to do is educate the masses. We don't just want to target vulnerable individuals to say, these are the skills you need to redirect everything that you've learned. We actually want to educate everybody to say, hey, when you're aware of something going on with your peer group, or you see something in the school grounds, it's okay for you to step up and say, that's not cool. I'm not okay with that. That's not how we want to be with each other. And it's amazing. I love these programs because these kids get so much out of this, and it's everybody. And then we've got our mentoring through sports, which does target vulnerable children. And this is not just kids who have experienced domestic and family violence, though. This is kids who are struggling to regulate their emotions, maybe struggling with relationships. They might be having challenges with behaviours themselves. They might be incredibly shy and so struggling with social anxiety. And we pull them together into a group, and it's one-on-one. They're out of the classroom, and we've got the Broncos boys, or we've got Sunshine Coast Lightning working with them along with the SunnyKids crew to develop skills. And they have no idea what they're learning in the background. And, kids are like sponges. They take everything in. And they're some of our easiest programs to measure because they measure themselves, and also the teachers measure how much improvement they've seen around their understanding of nutrition, their confidence in speaking up in class, redirecting language, and they become role models themselves. And it's a really incredible transition to see. And then moving into some of our sadder but still great programs like Tiny Tots and Kids Club. So Kids Club is designed to take children who are primary school aged and without mum, and into a group environment. And these are highly traumatized children who have witnessed and experienced a lot of abuse. And we work with them to develop independence from their environment and what they've experienced through play-based enjoyment. It's always strategic. There's always a therapeutic undertone to it. And it gives these kids an opportunity to be away from that trauma environment for a little while, and we do that every single week. We also have Tiny Tots. That program is designed to support mums and bubs, so kids who are 5 and under. The relationship between a mum and her child when she has had to flee into refuge can be broken, damaged, or interrupted, and every other word that you can think of. So that program is specifically designed to create fun, play, and engagement and attachment between the mum and her child after experiencing extreme trauma. As you can imagine, the stress of going through what they've experienced and then having to relocate and stay hidden and starting from scratch, there's a lot on mum's mind. So creating a space that is facilitated to allow them to bond is a really, really important thing to do. We're also working in a number of high schools with an intensive intervention program, and this program is called Snapback, and this program is designed to work with children who are on the track to youth justice intervention. So we're working with kids who have been in resi care, on home detention, who've used weapons, who have basically been tagged as incredibly antisocial individuals. And we work with them for an entire year, every single week, and we do group workshops plus individual case management with those kids, and we support their families too. But the work that we do in those workshops is about EQ development, so developing that emotional intelligence, reframing language, stereotypes. I mean, we had kids in grade 9 and grade 10 who thought being antisocial meant social anxiety. So, they're seeing how they're represented in social media and in the media, and it's completely incongruent with their understanding of who they are. So even the language that adults are using around how to describe youth behaviour is missing the mark. So that's part of what we are doing to work really closely with children and their families to break that cycle.
I think it's just amazing. And thank you so much for sharing. But you must have a big team behind you to pull all this off.
We do have a big team, actually. We have grown a lot over the years, and we've only grown, and I really want to acknowledge that because, for a lot of years, we had a very, very small team, and we still delivered a lot, but it was far from where we are now. The Sunshine Coast community has really supported us through fundraising, through engagement with our programs, through sponsoring particular programs. They have jumped on board, and the business community here have been phenomenal. They really put their money where their mouth is, and it has been amazing to see the growth. 50% of what we deliver, Annette, is because of this community. It's not government funding, and that is astounding. I don't know any other community in Australia that is as committed as the Sunshine Coast community to the change we want to see. They are doing it every day by supporting us.
And I think the proof is there from what you've been doing for, 16 odd years. You've had such an enormous amount of success. Whatever you're doing is working. And I'm sure that you will continue to get that support because you're passionate about what you do. And I'm sure that the team are equally as passionate. We've touched on a few different topics that make up SunnyKids today. One word that stands out to me for people that are going through domestic violence, leaving and rebuilding their life, be courage. The courage to tell someone, the courage to ask for help, and sometimes the courage just to get through the next day. For someone listening who may be in a situation that doesn't feel safe, what would you want them to hear about finding that first small piece of courage?
Yeah, I agree. Courage is a really great way to describe that. And what I would say is you don't have to go all in. You can test the waters. You can just start having a conversation. You can just start Googling services in your area. You can just make a phone call. You don't have to be completely vulnerable from the get-go. It's okay for you to just start asking curious questions and just start testing relationships in your world with friends and family even, and just see who would be receptive to you opening up a little bit more. It's okay if you're not ready right now to end things, and it is possible to rebuild a healthy relationship from an unhealthy one. It is possible, but it takes an awful lot of work, and no one should ever have to do it alone. But, we're humans, and we're driven by shame and ego and put those things together, and it silences us. So my advice would be just reach out, and it's okay to self-protect. It's okay to just share a little to start with. If you're speaking with the right person, if you're speaking with a professional who knows this, who is a practitioner, they're going to know what you're not saying, and they're not going to pressure you to say more. It's just going to be, how do we help you now?
Such good advice. Thank you. And if today's episode has encouraged someone out there to learn more, support the work, or start a conversation in your own circle, please look up SunnyKids and find out how you can be part of the village around the children and families that they support. Kathleen, thank you so much for your time today and for the work you do and the SunnyKids team do across our community. We so appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time, Annette. I appreciate you shining a lot of light on this topic and keeping this top of mind for everyone.
You're most welcome. I just wanted to end by acknowledging that today we were discussing domestic and family violence, trauma, family stress, and the impact these experiences can have on children. If anything we've spoken about has felt close to home, please know you are not alone. Consider speaking with someone you trust or contacting a specialist support service like Kathleen mentioned. If you or someone else is in immediate danger, please call AAA. Thank you again, Kathleen. I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much.
You've been listening to The Cauldron. Thank you for being here. It means a lot. Please follow and share our social media pages for more episodes. Until next time, be kind, be caring, be connected.